Welcome to the I Get Better podcast with your hosts, Charlene Renee and Phaedra Smith, where we discuss topics related to life, love, mental, physical, and spiritual health, and how we can all get better together. Hi, guys, and welcome back. Today's show featured a very special guest. His name is James Bush. James owns and runs Bush Counseling Services. He is the program director for Youth Overcoming Drug Abuse. He's a licensed professional counselor in the state of Tennessee, as well as a professional thought facilitator. He aids his community by challenging negative self and world perceptions, by promoting reimagination, using tools such as empathetic listening, adaptive processing, and empowering education to bridge and enhance the local and global community one person at a time. James brought a fresh and a new perspective to the show. He was able to help us learn and see from a male perspective, also from a Black male perspective. We hope that you are able to gain some valuable insight just as we were.
Welcome back to the I Get Better podcast. I'm your host, Charlene Renee.
And I'm Phaedra Smith.
And today we have a special guest joining us today. We have Mr. James Bush of Bush Counseling Services. Can you introduce yourself to the people?
Oh, that's my cue?
That's your cue.
Hello, my name is James Bush. I'm from Bush Counseling Services, as Charlene said. I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Tennessee. I'm also an international speaker, as well as I just like sitting on the couch and talking to wonderful individuals like you all.
All right. So we have a very, very special topic to get into today. Today, we're going to be talking about how I get better when I get real. And what we're going to be getting real about today is substance abuse in the Black community. And James has a very special niche of speaking with the male community. So we definitely want to get that perspective on today because we have a lot of substance abuse in our community and we want to make this more aware or bring awareness to the subject as well as ways to prevent it and give you some information on how to cope in alternative ways. So I think this is a really important topic, especially during this time, these COVID-19 times where a lot of people are under a lot of stress and they're finding alternative ways to cope with that stress, with some of which are maladaptive, such as engaging in substance abuse, alcohol use, drug use. So let's go ahead and jump right in. You know, we always like to start it off with defining the thing that we're going to be talking about. So Phaedra, why don't you hit us with that definition?
So the definition that I found was substance abuse is the overindulgence in or dependence on an addictive substance, especially alcohol or drugs.
Right. And so when we talk about substance use, typically a lot of the time people revert to thinking about drugs and they don't necessarily consider alcohol to be a drug. But alcohol is a very prevalent drug and it's a legal drug in this country. And so I think that's why a lot of people shy away from saying substance abuse when they're talking about alcohol, because it's legal and it's so widespread and it's so accepted. But it definitely is a part of that addictive or addiction category as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really excited about this topic because I feel like it's very controversial and I feel like people don't, especially in the Black community, don't always recognize it as a thing. They don't really recognize it as a negative coping skill. I'm glad that you're on the show because that's not either of our expertise. So good to have someone else from another background.
Definitely. So I kind of want to talk about, to start, what are some reasons why people engage in substance use? So before we even get into the abuse part of it, I want to talk about substance use as a whole. Like, what are some of the things that you see as reasons or influences to kind of lead people to engage in substance use in the first place?
Well, some of the things that I've seen, first and foremost, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. I run an adolescent program for a substance abuse treatment for adolescents 13 to 18 years old who are suffering from substance abuse themselves. And some of the things that I've seen from them is it starts earlier in life. Someone that's 80 years old are smoking marijuana. And so what is happening is in those moments, they're trying to find ways, one, experimentation, two, find ways to cope with the different stressors of life, especially when you're in maybe impoverished communities or there are horrors and atrocities that you're witnessing down your block, down your street, around the corner. And a lot of them aren't hip to going to see a licensed professional counselor or a licensed mental health clinician or so. So they try to find different ways to deal with it themselves, noting that those substances are highly addictive. In addition with that as well, you'll find that sometimes too, where maybe someone is suffering from ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so now we're looking at that person. They don't want to take Strattera. They don't want to take Vyvanse. They don't want to take Adderall. They don't want to take Ritalin. What they want to do is, hey, because of the side effects of those drugs. So what will they do? They'll go and they'll smoke a blunt. Why? Because it'll help them feel better in the end, or something like that in that evening. And the thing is that, again, these things are somewhat addictive or so in nature. And so that does not help the ADHD. It gives you a temporary solution and ease from the discomfort that you're feeling, but ultimately it does not do nothing for your whole situation in total.
Right. Well, that's a very, very good point. So one of the key words you said is it's a coping mechanism. And so not only with dealing with maybe some mental health disorder symptoms, but additionally just environmental and community issues that you face in everyday life. And so I agree. Many people find that alcohol and drugs can provide some relief or escape from reality. If their reality isn't so pretty, or if it's not so ideal, they find that as a way to kind of get away temporarily, of course. But as you said, a lot of the times it's just a temporary relief, and it leaves you, and at the end of it, you're back to where you started. So it's important to identify some reasons why that might get started. Like you said, I'm glad you made a good point, because it's something I wanted to talk about anyway, is how it starts at a young age. And we were talking about this earlier, about how there's so many media influences, especially for the youth, a lot of the time, specifically in music, where that's promoted, or it's just, or it's promoted by people that they're surrounded by, older siblings, older cousins, older adults in their life, where they may see them engaging in alcohol use or drug use, and so to them that's just the norm. And so it's like it's not a big deal. It's something, well, this is just what we do.
Well, I look at sometimes some substances are numbing agents, and what they do is they kind of just help abate the pain from and continuing to overrule us in our moments, in those moments of discomfort and displeasure or so. So, for instance, if you have, say, someone that is suffering from a heavy something that's happening with their arm or elbow or anything like that, and they may take an opioid to kind of help themselves with that, and so they'll continue to take these opioids so that they won't have the pain, of that moment or anything like that. And so now that is a learned behavior. We, for some reason, we have been trained and programmed to use conditions. Look, therapist. So we have been conditioned to use certain substances or certain devices to kind of abate pain in our bodies or in our minds, and dealing with certain situations. And sometimes when I look at pain or trauma, I look at it on a continuum. So I can't maybe necessarily identify with the same trauma as someone else has, or someone that has had certain situations that has happened to them. And so, because all trauma is not created equal. Now, whatever is affecting you or is devastating you is devastating you, and that's all that matters when it comes to you. So now at that point, you are at the point of, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to go and find healthy or suitable ways to deal with the situation? Or are you going to go and take the little blue pill or the little white pill or the 30 milligrams to kind of like erase that? And also too, from a financial standpoint, we have healthcare. Healthcare sucks in a lot of corners of this country. And I'm just going to be honest. And so now when you have access to certain pills or something like that for some people that get them in abundance, that's great. For some people who can't afford them, that's terrible. And so now they have to find different mechanisms to kind of help them, i.e. heroin, because heroin is a lot cheaper than those opioids in some sense.
That's definitely true. I'm glad you made that point about pain, alleviating pain, but there's also the flip side of the pleasurable effects that it can have. Even if you're not experiencing any pain, it's going to activate those chemicals, will activate the pleasure receptors in your brain and release those chemicals, that dopamine,
the dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine.
Right. So all of these things are also desirable because human nature seek pleasure, avoid pain. So you're going to do things that make you feel good, sometimes even when you're not necessarily feeling bad, especially when you think of, well, I want to party, I want to turn up. So turn up means let me get a little more hype, a little more energy, a little bit more happy, some happy juice to kind of be able to turn up. So that's also a driving force, I think, in people seeking out those substances. Not necessarily always to cope with stress, but sometimes just to have a good time. But when it becomes an issue is when it's taking over, or it's taking on that addictive component, or it's causing other negative consequences in your life, which is not always brought to the forefront, or it's denied. People are in denial about those things.
What do you say when people, because that was a debate that I had with some family members, and we were talking about how at some point the drug usage turns from I'm choosing to use this drug to now like I'm addicted, and them feeling like they're still in control when really the drug is really in control now.
Right.
What do you say to people when they don't understand, when it becomes less of a choice and now like it's a physiological need? How do you tell people, no, you're not choosing, you are addicted now?
Well, it's something that the DSM-5 that outlines is what constitutes as substance use disorder. And so it has in there different little questions, or I won't say questions, but little scenarios. And so if you have a substance where you continually use it, but you can't function and go to work without using it, that's a problem. That's like I was watching one documentary about a wrestler. Well, I'm not going to say his name, but the fact is that he needed a certain amount of cocaine before he went out and wrestled. And so he wasn't going out of there until he got that amount of cocaine. And so that would constitute as a criteria for substance use disorder. Also, along with that, if you are continuing to use despite negative consequences or so if I continue to use and I'm stealing granny's iPad, or I'm taking my kids 12 o'clock at night so I can go on a bender to kind of search for something to buy or anything like that, those are negative consequences because DCS will get involved with that at some point in time. And so that is another criteria for a substance use disorder. So it's different little things around that rubric that we can look at, we can pinpoint. We'll say, yeah, you fit this, you fit that mold, you fit that mold, or so like that. And that's when it seems like it has become a problem, when the animal or the substance has got control of you as opposed to you are in control of it.
Absolutely. You brought up ADHD earlier, and I like that point because I work with a lot of trauma, and so one of the things I teach parents and children is that trauma looks like ADHD, and so a lot of kiddos get diagnosed with ADHD when it really is trauma. What do you say to individuals that are self-treating their ADHD or trauma when they say, well, listen, I still have these symptoms, like I'm still struggling with this and this and that, and a blunt helps me? How do you help them treat the ADHD symptoms without marijuana or whatever?
I tell them, stop it. Stop it. Stop. It's like, dude, you're not helping yourself. One thing I learned from early on when I was working is that marijuana counteracts the active ingredients in those ADHD medications like Vyvanse and Strattera. And at times it takes a significant amount of time for your body to clear out so that they can have the work that they need to have being done. And with that being said, it's like fool's gold. So it's like you're using this and you're believing that it's going to help you ultimately, but it has a residual negative effect on the back end if you're not careful. And so we have to go and we have to use the evidence-based models that could kind of help us in those type of situations. And one is, working with some pharmacological aspect, that's medication for those who don't know, as well as clinical therapy, talk therapy. Those two combined together have proven effective in working with individuals who suffer from those mental health disorders. Now, sister, the issue that comes down to it is how much time does someone have to devote to their own mental health or their own well-being? because a lot of times we have jobs, we have schools, we have responsibilities, and sometimes it's very difficult for us to make all those appointments, nonetheless pay for those appointments as well because of healthcare.
Right.
So then it's like, okay, skip all that. I'll go smoke a blunt and I'll deal with whatever I got to deal with later on. So
yep, that's very true. Well, I think one of the things also is that marijuana has become legal for a lot of people, and they are using it also in conjunction with therapy. And so, I have to tell my clients,
said that. Yeah,
I'm gonna need you to come in not high, okay?
Really? Well, see, I had one of them that
smelling like it, right?
He pulled out a dab pen right in the middle of a session, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm just like, I'm going to see where this goes, And I mean, he just pulled a dab pen out, and and I'm like, okay, hey, is that what you feel the most comfortable at? Right, well,
what we doing now? That's how
this is what we do. This is what we're doing. I mean, I'm glad you feel comfortable around me to do that. And so, I mean, that's one of those things that the era that we're in, I think it has made certain allowances for certain behaviors to take place, and it's just evolution. And so if it's not that, it'll be something else next.
Well, a lot of people say, well, it's natural, and and that's the biggest thing I hear. Well, it's from the earth.
From the earth. Everybody watched Friday, right?
Yeah.
Earth. Okay.
But I tell people it's another coping mechanism. It's something else. What are we really trying to mask? What are we trying to numb? And what do we need to really treat? And those, and like you said before, they're numbing agents. So
I mean, let's not make no mistake. Marijuana does work. It does have its values. Now, let's talk about when it comes to children, because I think even the proponents and those who are against certain uses of marijuana, they do agree on this point, that when you're an adolescent and your brain is still in development, that is not the thing that you should use. Because why? It teaches you negative coping mechanisms. It teaches you to go and reach out for a blunt respectively, as opposed to using some other suitable mechanism that will be beneficial for you long-term in life. Because all in all, we cannot just go and run for a blunt every time. It just doesn't work that way. It's just grab. And then also too, you are getting to the mode, what I mentioned earlier, where you are placing more value in substances as to cure your ills and all your woes in life, as opposed to finding that internal reservoir, focusing on community, looking for social gatherings, meetings, sponsorship, communication, as those things will help you to find that, I want to say the not the oh crap moment, but it'll help you get past that moment or that trigger that you're facing in that moment. But if we could just go reach for a blunt, then man, that's easy, and it's a repetitive pattern, and then it becomes a habit. Possibly.
Yeah, and so it's just training your brain.
Yes.
This is what you do. And like you said, in adolescence, your brain is still developing, and you're just learning this is how I cope. I don't even need to learn how to communicate with people. I don't even need to learn how to express my emotions. I don't even need to learn other tools and skills to deal with managing my emotions.
You don't do that.
Like maybe just exercise or something else, or change my diet. All the other things that you can do to turn to shift your mood.
Exactly.
But you have an excellent point. But and the marijuana discussion, I think, is just a whole nother discussion, because I have my own personal feelings about that. But let's talk about the drugs that we're not talking about that is really impacting our community. The opioids, the synthetic opioids, the things that are really silently killing us in our community because we don't talk about it, or it's glorified, or it's glamorized, or it's pushed under the rug, and people are dying. Like young people are dying every day in our community, and that nationally. It's not just our community, but specifically our community is one of the ones that doesn't necessarily bring this to the forefront. And it's really important because it's on the rise. So let's talk about opioid use and addiction that's kind of impacting our community a little bit, because we don't usually, most people think drugs, you think weed, you think cocaine, you think crack, you think those the ones that are popular name wise, but you don't necessarily hear us talking about opioid use and prevalence of it.
That's just I think that depends on what pocket you're in, because there are certain areas where especially younger generation in certain sectors now, every pocket has their choice. It's like, for instance, I could be in the middle of the inner city and they're like, what is ketamine? Well, I could be out in the middle of the suburbs or the rural area, like they'll do ketamine because you got horses and everything out there. So my whole point of what I'm trying to say is that certain drugs are exclusive and germane to certain areas and, prone to certain areas. Now, for some reason, a lot of the younger individuals that I work with, they're like, I'll sell pills, but I won't do it because that's not just something I do. But this is crazy because they'll go and they won't do that, but then they'll watch Future or Lil Wayne and they'll say, I'll fool with lean though, and I'll do that, or I'll do bars, which is Xanax, Prazolam. And so they'll do that. And I guess it's more of a designer area that's they're being, I guess, conditioned to use. Now, when we talk about opioids, one of the things that we have to be mindful of is that nowadays, opioids are being mixed with all kinds of garbage. And so then you have the introduction of fentanyl. Fentanyl is cheaper to make. Matter of fact, one of the biggest areas that produce fentanyl, believe it or not, was Wuhan, China. That area that's all this whole COVID thing is supposedly covered. And supposedly fentanyl production is down and the value of it has gone up a little bit, just a tad bit. So from one of the last reports I've made, in the recent area that I've seen, there have been a lot of more overdoses that have happened or so.
Yeah,
and that is because
there was actually an article, I was reading it. I read my Yahoo News typically, and it was like one of the front page, a football player in Washington, they just said, we just revealed his cause of death was an accidental overdose from fentanyl and promethazine. So he combined these two drugs and he accidentally overdosed on it. He's 22 years old.
Let me ask you this. Did he do that or did it somebody that sold that to him? Because we've seen some recent cases where someone came in and they thought they were buying crack, but it was also crack mixed with fentanyl. And so because of that, you have you have maybe 10 or 20 individuals that buy from the same dealer fentanyl mixed with crack. And then all of a sudden they go around the corner and then you got ODs everywhere. And now they're trying to use Narcan, which is overdose reduction or overdose reversal substance to revive them. And
but most people don't know. You have to find them to revive them. These people are dying because they're and they're going to sleep, and then the next day they're waking up dead. So Narcan only works if you can get it to them.
If you can get it to
immediately.
And so it's just one of those things where it's like following the dots on a sequence where you got the user, you got the dealer, then you got the user. He goes here, he goes there, he goes there, he uses, and now it's like the race is on to find him before the clock ends. And that's what we're seeing a lot of nowadays. They're because of the COVID situation, and also too, believe it or not, because of the stimulus package that has just been awarded to a lot of individuals. They are using at home. They're isolated. They are out of jobs. They are some stressed. They have internal stress because of work. Some stress because of family, social, marriages, coupleships, and everything like that. And that's are some of the precipitating factors and triggers that are leading to them using.
Wow, so it's getting serious out here. Like, especially due to these circumstances that people weren't anticipating. So even those who may have been using before all of this, you're seeing an increase because they have additional free time on their hands, additional stress, additional environmental or societal factors. So it's like
additional money,
compounding interest. Additional money. Maybe that stimulus provided a nice chunk to go out and buy, additional substances. Hopefully people used it for their bills, but we don't know. People use it for whatever they feel they need at the time. So that could have been a need.
Well, I think a big thing, one of the things I know for me, I've gotten an increase in clients, and most people are coming to me about anxiety. And so you got to think about the people that aren't reaching out to therapists for anxiety at this point. They still experiencing anxiety, but they're finding other ways to cope with it. And so this is a whole nother area that really I hadn't really given thought to. But yes, it's anxiety, drug uses, or increase in increase in domestic violence. There's a lot of increases in a lot of negative coping skills or negative mechanisms that people are utilizing other than therapy and stuff. So,
well, like you said, it's about convenience. It's about cost, having access to care, affordable care.
Yeah.
If you don't have a job, you don't have insurance, you might not be able to access a therapist or a counselor. You technically, you're not supposed to be going out, so you have to resort to telehealth. Some people don't have access to telehealth. Some people don't have access to the internet to get their children's schoolwork done, so they don't have access to the internet to see a therapist. So what do? How do we put some mechanism in place to not only increase awareness but preventative measures to reduce the impact that we're seeing? I read an article, again, reading the newspaper, how liquor sales have skyrocketed during this time. People are finding a way to get some liquor.
What else are you going to
do? You know, I mean, happy really? Hours are just rampant at the house, you know.
No. They have virtual happy hour. You know,
that is true, right? Zoom meeting happy hours.
Virtual happy hour, virtual cocktail parties, virtual club nights and everything, where everybody gets dressed up in their nice fancy duds, and maybe they'll go and they'll smoke a blunt while they're on the Zoom or whatever party app there is, and they'll have a nice something, whatever it is.
All the Instagram DJs are going live almost every night. You know, you can have a party at the house.
You can have a party at the house. Now, there's no physical touch or social interaction along those lines, but you know, it'll do. As they say, it'll do.
So what are some ways that we always try to bring it back to, some ways we can overcome these barriers, or ways that we can get better in this area? What are some things that you give out to your clients?
Well, one of the things is, first and foremost, is, especially in this day and age, is community. You have things such as the AA groups and the NA groups and the SA groups and all types of addiction recovery support systems. Community is very important, because I think sometimes a lot of people, they operate in silos. They operate alone by themselves, and they suffer so much shame and guilt from whatever it is that they have in life. And so that sometimes propels them to continue to use. And so being able to talk about this, sometimes it might not even be with a therapist, because you might not have access to that person, but a trusted friend, somebody you respect, somebody that you can vibe with. I think it's very important to identify those individuals. The next thing I would say also along with that is, again, like I said, it's a powerful community, but being active. And so exercising, as she said earlier, exercising, doing service work, getting outside yourself. Sometimes when we have this thing called play the tape through. So when somebody's just suffering from a triggering moment, and there's a thought process of allowing the tape to go through. So you're allowing it, you're seeing yourself using. Now, how do you feel after you use the substance? Do you feel great? Do you feel awesome? Or do you feel shame? Do you feel disappointed that you used it, or so that you kind of messed up again? So play the tape through. And so sometimes that, while you're playing the tape through in that moment, that can involve calling somebody. I've had clients who have called their DCS caseworkers, you know, because they were in jeopardy of using, because they had had a stressful day. So that is very important as well. On sponsorship, resources, trying things new, baking, cooking, knitting. That is something like doing a project, you know, keeping your mind focused, having a goal or something to move towards. I think that's what's really hurting a lot of individuals now. It's not just the fact that they're off of work, but at the house and they have nothing to do. And so why not smoke? Why not use? Why not drink? Or why not, you know, just try to find something to numb yourself from the current reality that it is that it sucks, especially if you are an extrovert, or maybe an introvert as well too. But it sucks because the life, the patterns that you're so used to, you have no access to them at this time.
Yeah, you hit most of the points I was going to make already. It's specifically that community aspect. So what I was going to say is a way to get better is not just addressing the component of use, but taking a holistic approach, which includes tapping into your community resources, medical aspect as well. Maybe you do need to go for medical treatment or
Maybe.
on some kind of medical prescription medication to deal with certain things. You also have to acknowledge the systemic impacts that contribute to youth and deal with those. Some of the things, like you mentioned, poverty and these things contribute to youth. And so we can't just say deal with the person without dealing with the system that contributes to the formation of these habits and these patterns of behavior. But additionally, is to increase our awareness and also look at the community or those who have a platform to target the community through culturally relevant things. So I've been reading about this, and it's the drug prevention ads and things like that typically aren't tailored to our community and the issues that are faced in the Black community. So looking at ways to find culturally relevant platforms that promote decreasing use of substances to cope, like for example through music. And so one of the things I was talking about earlier with Phaedra before we started was J. Cole's album that he came out with a couple years ago called KOD. And I remember listening to this album a couple years ago, and I was like, man, this is a good album. I hadn't really ever listened to J. Cole like that, but the album's called KOD, and then I wondered what it stood for, and I read about it. He said it stood for Kids on Drugs. And he's talking about in this whole album about the prevalence of addiction in our community. And so he's got this specific song, and I'll probably play a little bit of it like at the end of the show, just adding on the back end, but it's called Friends. And so I brought up, because I think this is a culturally relevant way to reach our community and talk about addiction and the impacts of it. So I brought up the song and I brought up the lyrics to the song. So just a couple of things that I noticed in one of the verses, and I'll just kind of read a little bit. And some of it has a lot of cussing in it, so I ain't gonna say everything. But basically, he's talking about there's all sorts of trauma from drama that children see, type of ish that would normally call for therapy. And so then it goes on to say, but that's just how it go in our community. Keep that ish inside, no matter how hard it be. Fast forward, them kids is grown and they blowing trees and popping pills due to chronic anxiety. And so it goes on and on and on about all the things that people blame the reason why they use drugs, and basically talking about depression and drug addiction. And so in the end of it, he's like, well, there's a better way to deal with it. So instead of medicating, meditate. And so he's promoting alternatives to coping with the stress and the things that you've experienced in your life and the trauma by either going to therapy or meditating. And so that's an alternative way to cope that people don't usually hear about in our community. I know growing up, I never, ever heard anyone tell me to meditate. And so that was like a foreign concept to me in my growing up in my community. Now maybe there are other people and other families who grew up differently, but I don't know. Phaedra, did you ever have that taught to you?
No, I heard about tearing on the altar, praying and crying out to God, but
well, prayer is a form. I think prayer is a form of meditation. So
yes, but it wasn't. That's not what they was teaching us. That was not the kind. So I tell a lot of my, sisters and brothers, we pray and you do all the things to promote your spiritual well-being, but also, hey, there's some other things that Jesus meditated, like let's read the whole Bible, and and learn about everything and not just some of the things. So no, that was not in my circle.
Was it your repertoire of emotional health? I don't know. What about you, James? Did you ever hear about additional coping mechanisms from those
at the altar? That's all I heard. I didn't hear about there. I mean, the fact I didn't know the dimensions and the diversity of meditation or anything like that. I thought it was some type of like Shaolin technique or something like that from Asian culture, and that was never introduced to me. And so, and it's crazy because sometimes when you know better, you do better. And I don't think that sometimes in our culture, we were given that option or that opportunity. One, because we didn't know about it, and two, because the individuals that were presenting it to us, we didn't necessarily trust them. Because if they didn't look like us, then I'm not taking anything from you. I mean, we got to understand, when we came about, the civil rights era was less than 30 years old, or 30 to 20 years old when that all took place. So it was like, we looking at you sideways or anything like that. And anything that you proposing or suggesting, we ain't really going for that.
Right. If grandma ain't say it, then I ain't doing it.
No, I ain't doing it. So you go down there and you talk to that pastor who got problems his own self. And man, you figure out, man, what you need to do with your life. But other than that, or you just keep it all held in and you don't talk about it and you just let it eat you up.
Right. And that's the point. Like you said, that even then your pastors, they look like you typically. So you would take advice typically from them, or what they have to say will hold more weight. So that's what I mean by like that prevention piece is gotta come from some people who look like us, specifically targeting our community with things that are culturally relevant and acceptable, so that it can go down easier, and it's not a matter of preaching or just telling people to stop doing something. I don't think that's enough, because there are things such as harm reduction, and so even just educating people on ways to reduce their use, because some people just aren't going to stop. It doesn't matter what you say, but they may not do it as often if you educate them on alternatives. Well, maybe instead of drinking 5 days a week, I cut down to 2. Well, that's still good. That's still progress. That's something, and so not being so hard on people, and making it like judgment free. We all go through things, and we all have ways that we try to deal with stress, and we try to cope. And I would never try to make myself out to be somebody who's like, well, I don't drink. Well, maybe I drink in moderation, and I have some control, and I've learned other tools and other skills to cope with situations. And so making sure that we increase the awareness. I think this is an important start to that discussion. I think we want to keep this conversation going offline and have some of our listeners chime in, and also provide them with some additional coping mechanism and tools that they can use, even if they can't get to therapy, to address these issues. I think I like what you said about that community, and finding support groups and finding people, even if it's not going to an official meeting, an AA or an NA meeting, but even if you have a group of friends that you can talk with and express yourself with, especially during these times, get on a group call, get on a chat, instead of running to the blunt or running to the bottle.
I mean, because to end it all up, there's many ways to recovery. I mean, I think sometimes some people, they built up and there's this one yellow brick road that leads straight to you being free from all substance use and abuse and anything like that. But that's false. There's many ways. Just like there's diversities in many different individuals who have different backgrounds, experiences, ways of thoughts, patterns, and belief systems. There's many ways that you can be free of whatever it is that you need to. It's just about execution, and you have to put in the work to actually get there. And what works for you is what works for you. And sometimes it takes time for you finding out what actually works. Sometimes 12 steps is not enough. Sometimes 30 days in recovery is not enough. Sometimes harm reduction is not enough. But whatever it is on your lane or in your lane, or that identifies with you, I implore you to try it, and I implore you to seek with all you can.
Amen. All right, so I think that will wrap us up for today. But before we go, why don't you let the people know how they can reach you, or how they can find out more information about you, like your website, your Instagram, where they can find you.
Well, wow. Where do I start? So I am on IG at Bush Counseling. You can find me on Facebook, Bush Counseling Services, LLC. There I'll be hosting, if I can ever get it together, Mind of a Man podcast as well too. That's coming in the next month or so. I'm just shot a couple episodes recently. I'm excited about that. Also too, you can reach me via email, james@bushcounselingservices.com. That's james@bushcounselingservices.com. I always have my phone around me, and I love talking to different people.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, James.
Today.
Thank you.
No problem.
Appreciate your input. Again, we want to keep the conversation going offline. So make sure you hit us up, send us a message, email us, contact us at I Get Better Podcast, and let us know your thoughts and let us know your experiences with this as well. So until next time, make sure you like, subscribe, share, comment, and review I Get Better Podcast. Until next time, let's keep getting better in order to do better, in order to be better. So we will talk to you all later. Thanks for joining us today.
Bye.
Bye.